Welcome to Brew Cheese, where we brew up the finest of cheese. I'm Micah, and thanks for tuning in. The upcoming Ikoria set contains a surprising number of cards at the common and uncommon level that might be great additions to your commander deck. For the most part, I didn't pick any mutate cards, nor did I pick cards that are payoffs for cycling. I was more concerned with cards that will fit into a wide variety of decks. So having said that, the following are my picks for cards that you might want to pick up. Blister Spit Gremlin is a single red for a 1/1 gremlin. You can pay 1 and tap, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Blister Spit Gremlin. This is comparable to Thermo Alchemist, but also similar in role and function to Firebrand Archer and Electrostatic Field, in that they go with a Spellslinger style deck, or an artifact-based deck. Like the Thermo Alchemist, you can activate the Gremlin even if you don't have anything to cast, so it'll always be useful. Blood Curdle is a black and 3 for an instant that destroys target creature, and you put a menace counter on a creature you control. Unconditional creature removal at instant speed is always good, and that this leaves one of your creatures with an evasive ability is a pretty nice reason to include it. Fully Grown is a green and 2 for an instant, and it gives target creature +3/+3 until end of turn, and you put a trample counter on it. In the same cycle as the previous card, Fully Grown acts like a giant growth style combat trick, but with the addition of giving a creature trample permanently. There's an awful lot of massive creatures, especially in green, that would benefit from the addition of trample, and throwing in an extra 3 power toughness makes this a nice combat trick. Spontaneous Flight is a white and 2 for an instant, and it gives a creature +2/+2 until end of turn and puts a flying counter on it. Very similar to the last 2 picks, this card grants an evasive ability to one of your creatures and provides a nice surprise stat boost. It's also handy to use to suddenly have a flying blocker if you're being attacked in the air. Fire Prophecy is a red and 1 for an instant that deals 3 damage to target creature, and you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, draw a card. At just 2 mana and instant speed, this spell lets you kill off a weak creature or finish off a wounded one, and adds the ability to get rid of a card you may not need and draw a replacement. Gust of Wind is a blue and 3, maybe, for a sorcery. It costs 2 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. You return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand and draw a card. Flying is one of the most common evasive abilities, especially in blue. In most decks, that makes this like a Disperse that replaces itself. I wish it were instant like Disperse, but the fact that it replaces itself is pretty valuable and probably worth the sorcery speed. Humble Naturalist is a green and 1 for a 1/3 human druid. You can tap it to add a mana of any color, and you have to spend that mana only on creature spells. Mana dorks are always welcome, particularly ones that can make all colors. Granted, this does have the restriction on what you use it on, but this should slot right into any multicolored creature heavy deck. Light of Hope is a single white for an instant, and you choose 1 to either gain 4 life, destroy target enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Modular spells are always great, especially instant ones, because they'll always be useful. Destroying the enchantment is likely the mode you'll pick, but gaining 4 life may save you from the brink of death, and putting a counter on a creature can be an okay combat trick, especially since Heartless Act is poised to be one of the more popular removal pieces of the set. Speaking of, Heartless Act is one of my choices, so even though we're not to the uncommons yet, it's already on screen, so I might as well talk about it. It's a black and 1 for an instant, and you choose 1 to either destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. Although the Ikoria set deals heavily in counters, especially ability counters, most existing commander decks are probably only going to dabble in these. And although some commander decks focus heavily on +1/+1 counters, there's usually a good target on the table for Heartless Act. The second mode probably won't be used quite as much, but it has some corner uses. Draining loyalty counters off a Gideon that someone's turned into a creature, for instance. Of One Mind is a blue and 2 for a sorcery, and it costs 2 less to cast if you control a human creature and a non-human creature, and you draw 2 cards. Most commander decks have a mix of creature types in them without even trying, so there's a good chance you'll meet the cost reduction qualifier on this. If you do, this makes it into a mini version of Ancestral Recall. Perimeter Sergeant is a white and 2 for a 3/2 human soldier. Whenever it attacks, other humans you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Although not the most impressive Anthem effect, the fact that this slots nicely into any human tribal deck looking to stay on a budget means that I believe that it will see some play, especially in decks capable of making a lot of human tokens. Pyroceratops is a red and 3 for a 2/3 elemental dinosaur, and it has trample, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Pyroceratops. I like that Wizards has started giving incentives to play a blend of creatures and spell slinging, and this creature having trample makes it a decent payoff for doing so. It triggers on any non-creature spell, so something like an artifact deck might also want this. Ram Through is green and 1 for an instant, and target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. If the creature you control has trample, excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. Fight effects are already great removal in green, and one-sided fights are even better. This is a 2-mana instant speed one-sided fight that allows excess damage to trample through. I'm honestly surprised that this is a common and not uncommon. Serrated Scorpion is a single black for a 1/2 Scorpion, and when it dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Reanimation and Aristocrats decks love creatures like these, and I can tell you now with that 1 power and 2 life drain, this is going straight into my Shirei deck. Shredded Sails is a red and 1 for an instant, and you choose 1 to destroy target artifact, deal 4 damage to target creature with flying, or cycle it away for 2. I repeat my earlier statement about instant speed modular spells, and this one's no exception. Killing the majority of creatures that have flying or destroying an artifact will always be useful, and in the scenario that it's not, it has a third mode where you can cycle it away. Survivor's Bond is a green and 1 for a sorcery, and you choose 1 or both. Return target human creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or target non-human creature card. Again, having a mix of creature types will come naturally, and recovering 2 creatures from the graveyard for 2 mana is a pretty good deal. Wilt is a green and 1 for an instant that destroys target artifact or enchantment, and it also has cycling 2. Naturalize is already a popular card, so this being exactly the same but with cycling added makes it either a strict upgrade or a second copy. Now we move on to the uncommons. Back for More is 4 black-green for an instant, and you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. When you do, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control, so you don't actually have to fight anything if you don't want to. Reanimation effects are always great, and having a fight staple to it is even better. At its worst, you're reanimating something that will barely kill the other creature, making it an expensive and convoluted kill spell, but more likely it'll lead to you getting a creature back at instant speed. Can you tell I like instant speed? And killing something. Do it at the right time, and you can use the reanimated creature as a surprise blocker and take out 2 things. Barrier Breach is a green and 2 for an instant, and you exile up to 3 target enchantments, and it cycles away for 2. Anytime you can exile 3 things at instant speed, you know it's a good card. At most tables, finding 3 enchantments that you'd like to get rid of is pretty easy, and you don't have to have 3 targets as it says up to 3, so at its worst you're paying 3 mana to exile 1 enchantment or cycling it away. Bastion of Remembrance is a black and 2 for an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If any uncommon is going to see a lot of play from this set, it'll be this one. An instant staple for any Aristocrats deck, it being an enchantment makes it a little harder to interact with than other similar effects like Blood Artist or Zolaport Cutthroat, and it hits each opponent like the Cutthroat does. This does only trigger on your own creatures dying, however, so you won't get quite the blowout you would get from someone board wiping while you have Blood Artist out. Dire Tactics is a black and a white for an instant, and you exile target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. A 2-mana instant exile, yes please. There's a good chance you'll have a human, but even if you don't, it's not that big of a downside. General's Enforcer is also a black and a white for a 2/3 human soldier, and it has legendary humans you control have indestructible. You can pay 2 white and black to exile target card from a graveyard, and if that was a creature card, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. There's a lot of very popular human commanders that include black and white in their color identities, like Joda, Alesha, who this creature works really well with, Zur, Kenrith, Najila, and many, many more. The second ability to exile creatures from graveyards and get a token out of it isn't too shabby either. Migration Path is a green and 3 for a sorcery. You search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library, and it cycles for 2. Explosive Vegetation is already a popular card in almost 30,000 decks. This is a better version with cycling that you'll either swap in or run alongside it. Ominous Seas is a blue and 1 for an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, you put a foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas. You remove 8 foreshadow counters from it, and that creates an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. This cycles away for 2. A fantastic payoff for any deck wanting to draw cards and has blue in it, which is basically any deck with blue. This simple enchantment can be dropped early in the game or late. It's really interesting to note that when you remove the 8 counters, you don't sacrifice the enchantment like you do with similar effects, meaning that it stays out to make more Krakens. Parcel Beast is 2 a green and a blue for a 2/4 elemental beast, and it has Mutate for a green and a blue if you want to use that ability. You can pay 1 and tap to look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield, and if you don't put the card onto the battlefield, you put it into your hand. Parcel Beast doesn't have that when this creature mutates clause, so it's a lot more useful in more decks. It's the same effect as Coiling Oracle or Risen Reef, but it's repeatable on demand. Primal Empathy is 1 a green and a blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, and otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature or drawing an extra card are both things Simic colors like doing, so this is a natural fit in many decks. Reconnaissance Mission is 2 blue and 2 for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and it cycles for 2. This is very similar to Bident of Thassa and Coastal Piracy, and if you're already running those, chances are you'll welcome a 3rd card with the effect. Sanctuary Lockdown is a white and 2 for an enchantment, and it gives humans you control +1/+1. You can pay 2 and tap 2 untapped humans you control to tap target creature an opponent controls. Another humans-only anthem effect, but humans are a very popular tribe. It also has that neat tap effect that lets you turn your human tokens against the big threat at the table. Skull Prophet is a black and a green for a 3/1 human druid. You can tap it to add black or green, or you can tap it to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. A nice staple for Golgari graveyard decks. Early game, this can serve as either acceleration or get your first few cards into the graveyard. Late game, it can help to fill your graveyard even more. Proud Wild Bonder is 2 in Gruul, or red or green, for a 4/3 human warrior with trample. And creatures you control with trample you may have this creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Any deck with Gruul colors and either lots of creatures with trample or a commander that grants trample like Surek Dragonclaw will appreciate this super trample effect. Sonorous Howlbonder is 1 Rakdos, or black-red, for a 2/2 human warrior with menace, and each creature you control with menace can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Similar to the previous card, this is a sort of super menace, boosting it to 3 required creatures. It's already sometimes tough to come up with 2 blockers for menace, so this will likely lead to a lot more of your creatures making it through unblocked. It combos nicely with cards like Goblin War Drums, Ingreth, and Aroas. Sprite Dragon is a blue and a red for a 1/1 fairy dragon with flying and haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sprite Dragon. This one is one of my absolute favorites from the set. This flying haster gets big quickly in any deck running a lot of instant sorceries or artifacts, or planeswalkers, so it's a great early game or late game drop. Stormwild Caprador is a white and 2 for a 1/3 bird goat with flying. If non-combat damage would be dealt to Stormwild Caprador, prevent that damage and put a +1/+1 counter on it for each 1 damage prevented this way. This is great if you pair it with red with board wipes like Blasphemous Act, or green and Hurricane. It also goes nicely with Pestilence or Pyrohemia. Weaponize the Monsters is a single red for an enchantment, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice a creature, and Weaponize the Monsters deals 2 damage to any target. It's not as good as some red sack outlets like Goblin Bombardment, but it's a lot more budget friendly. It's similar to Barrage of Expendables, but it doubles the effect for double the cost, except that cost is generic, making it easier for multicolored decks to activate. I do have an honorable mention in the Crystal Cycle. That's Indotha, Ketria, Rogran, Savai, and Zygoth crystals. These produce respectively Abzan, Temur, Jeskai, Mardu, and Sultai colors when tapped for mana. They all cost 3 and they all cycle for 2. Although 3 mana rocks are not always going to be as ideal as 2 mana ones, the fact that these do tap for 3 different colors and have the ability to cycle away if you draw them late game makes them pretty good additions for budget decks. And that wraps up my picks for some commons and uncommons that fit into a wide variety of decks and that you'll want to keep in mind. Thank you for watching, and if you like what we're doing here, subscribe or share this video with a friend, or leave a comment telling us what we missed or what you'd like to see in the future. See you again next video.